Hello and welcome to the Perpetual Traffic Podcast.
The show where you can grow and scale your brand and learn whether or not we are using the or die for your entertaining purposes.
If you're not on our YouTube channel, you got to go to YouTube just to see like the fluffiness of Lauren's hair today. It's like off the charts fluffy. Like we went from greasy, long and custom to you like blonde and fluffy. So anyway, I'm Ralph Burns, the founder of Tier 11, and you are?
Lauren E. Petrullo, your favorite golden retriever.
And founder of Mongoose Media. Glad you joined us today. Make sure you go over to our Telegram group. Oh my God, the Telegram group is just, there's a lot going on in the Telegram group. Perpetualtraffic.com/Telegram, but you already know that. So I just stole your line actually in the intro. Sorry about that. But let's get into the actual show here today, which you threatened to do today's show in Italian. Are you going to do that?
Certo. Adesso stiamo parlando solamente in italiano.
That's great. That's great. Because I'm going to leave a link in the show notes because Cosmo and I did a show where we did, I forget which AI tool we used, but the entire episode is in Spanish and it's hysterical. But the guy...
Undici Labs?
It was, which one again?
Undici Labs. 11 Labs.
11. Oh, see, it was 11 Labs. See, now you're going back to the Italian thing. So, and I also did an episode way back when. You didn't realize this. I did it. The entire episode was in my Sean Connery voice. So, which is going to be very, very important because we're going to have Russ Henneberry on the show. I don't know if you know who he is, but he is like one of the funniest and smartest humans when it comes to content. But he also does a really good Sean Connery. So I have to up my game a little bit there. Lauren E. Petrullo, you and your Italian accents. So we're pretty excited about today's show because we're going to be talking about marketing performance indicators yet again. Yes, we're going to keep talking about these until you get it through your thick skull that this is the future of marketing. It's not all about in-app ROAS or your fluffy skull or greasy skull, or in my case, unshowered skull, because this stuff is important. And I think like one of the things that we're now doing is my CFO comes from sort of a background in corporate, and he was at KPMG for years and years, and he's doing like a lot of our mergers and acquisitions, but also he's also training our people on financial metrics because we've realized that these are so vitally important, which is so cool. Like, so we're going to get into some of those things here today. And we have a download for this where you can get all of this, like the glossary of terms, and we're going to improve this over time. By the way, this is our first iteration of it, but you can get that over at perpetualtraffic.com/MPI. That is the letter M, the letter P, the letter I, and get that download. So, and that is what we're going to be talking about here today. We're going to be talking about sort of the first line of that, where we get into a little bit more detail on some of the most important metrics I think that a lot of marketers forget about because they get so entrenched in what's going on in-app. And I'm talking to you, the media buyer out there, but the marketing manager, the VP of marketing, the CMO, and the CEO, what they really care about is different stuff. Like, do I have more money in my bank account? Do I have more profit today? Do I have more gross profit? Like, those are the metrics that matter now and today. Like, we weren't talking about this 6 or 7 years ago. We were talking about like some cool, trick on Power Editor inside Facebook. Like, that's not where it's going. Like, a lot of the media buying, like you as a media buyer need to understand it's more than just what you see inside. It's about these metrics. And we're going to be hitting on a few of these today. And we're going to do continuing our series on marketing performance indicators, which TJ did a great job of sort of explaining that a few episodes back. This is what we're going to focus on because it is so important. And then how to use them, how to report on them, how to read them, how to figure out what to do on a day-to-day basis with regard to them. And that, in my opinion, is the future of digital. Thoughts, comments, Lauren E. Petrullo, either in Italian or English. It's totally up to you.
Davvero? Io posso parlare. Okay. No, I'll do it in English because, by the way, side note, you're like, your face was like, oh, she said yes. Fun fact, when you're like MPI, I was like, oh, if we spelled this in Italian, I is actually E. So I
Oh.
was like, that will just cause lots of fun.
Mm.
But no, I mean, this is totally right. It's why a lot of brands that are either taking media buying in house or are questioning the value behind a media buyer is if you're just pushing the buttons and optimizing based off of like what your budget and bid strategies are, like that's not enough in today's conversation. So you need to not have the marketing metrics be your driving forward, but the business metrics behind some of these MPIs that we're discussing. So it's just a massive difference, especially when you start scaling brands. Because if you're starting with a brand that's doing like only $100 a day or only $1,000 a day of media buying, when you want to take them to that $10,000 a day or that, you know, that $40,000 a day mark, you need to be discussing these metrics because those numbers can drastically affect profit margin. So 100%, like I know we're going to be on this wagon for a little bit, but it's such a difference. And we're hearing it similarly in our conversations with clients where it's like, Facebook says one thing, my bank account says another. So let's marry the two.
Yeah. I was just on a call with a billion dollar, $1.1 billion company, and they were
With
having
a B.
With a B. So big company, not going to name who they are, but they sell physical products, primarily B2B and then secondarily to B2C. And just the idea of where I was talking to head of digital, and this is crazy to me, but this is not, I'm not saying that this individual is ill-informed because he's not. He's a super sharp guy, but it's like using all the channels together to actually get the end result is the way of the future. Is Meta and Google, and I think we actually did an episode on this. I'll have to find it. It's like enemies no more. It was like pre-you. It was with Qasim, with the guy with the greasy long hair, as opposed to the fluffy
Less
blonde
fluffy.
hair. Less fluffy.
Yeah.
We've gone fluffy here. Fluffy is way better.
He was like Team Scruff, right?
He's like Team Scruff too. Yeah, you're much. Yeah, no scruff on you. So, and I'm married to an Italian, so you know, scruff is a very sensitive subject with her. But anyway, the point is this: is that they are enemies. No, I was like, well, they work together, and he was really talking about just, hey, we really need to figure out like how to dial in our Google. I'm like, that's great. What do you do on social? Well, we don't really do a whole lot on social. I said, well, you know, part of the strategy now is that we'll look at obviously, you know, by channel, but really where you're going to lower your overall costs is by getting them to work together. You know, a kick-ass creative on a Facebook Reels or an Instagram Reels creates awareness that then prompts a Google search for your brand. And if you're not doing that, you're not boosting that, but the reel is going to get like 0.8 ROAS. And so you're going to be like, well, I should shut that off. But look at my Google search. Look at, you know, intent-based search, and they sell physical products specifically. So intent-based search could, and as well as, you know, maybe their brand. So doing a branding strategy on some of these channels that don't have any attribution, don't have a click. Like Reels really doesn't have a click. Yeah, there's ads on the bottom of them. I get it. You know, YouTube, obviously, there's calls to action. But in most cases, like if you're spending money boosting content on channels that have no attribution, but then you're getting the sale elsewhere, you're getting maybe the consideration, the middle phase, you know, somewhere in between, and then the final click through Google, and you're only measuring Google, it's the wrong way of doing it. And of course your costs are going to increase. And we've seen this time and time and time again, where you're single channel focused. You're like, Google's just stealing my money. Like I'm spending more money and I'm spending 2x, but I'm getting maybe like 10% more. And it's because you need to blend these traffic channels together. And that's really what we're seeing with the ones that scale, is they start to think of this differently and they use these metrics as a part of that.
It's the incrementality of where your efforts are going to yielding more profit in the long term.
Right. So if you're a business that you're saying, all right, well, that sounds great, but I'm not $1 billion company. Well, you should start thinking like $1 billion company. They got to a certain level of scale just doing it that way. And lots of other media. Like these guys are smart dudes. Like there's no getting around it. Like they've built an incredible business. The point is that like to get to that next level, you have to sort of break down the walls. And that's where, metrics like CAC, MER, AOV, like they make sense more if you're starting to blend channels together. And that I think is the big takeaway.
I
So
think there are a lot of brands too that where if it's like entering the digital media buying space, like if you just look at a bus stop and all the billboards on the benches or billboards along the road, those don't always have direct attribution for this like zero sum type of game environment. Generally speaking, who are the most successful lawyers in your community are the ones that are still investing on bench ads, are investing on billboards. Why?
yeah,
Because it still continues to speak about what we're talking about. So if it still seems like, oh, I'm still so reliant on digital, I get the one-to-one and I can treat these platforms like an ATM card, we have to take a step back a little bit and understand the halo effect of those investments so that it's not Google versus Meta. There's still always going to be some competition because of last click attribution, if that's the model you're looking at. But if you're spending all your effort on that aspect of it, you're missing the larger picture and you're losing the forest to a single tree.
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a reason for why TV advertising, why billboard advertising, why non-clickable, non-trackable media still works. It's because those folks take a broader view, a bigger view. And I'm not saying necessarily you need to start buying billboard ads.
No, there's still better ways, more efficient ways to spend.
Right. But if you're a local lawyer and you serve a certain market and Interstate 95 goes through your town, well, that may be a good place for you to get a lot of business. Like I have a friend of mine who has has a dispensary here in Massachusetts, and his only form of advertising is a billboard for people coming out, like going north from Boston on Interstate 93, and it's like a half a mile before the exit. Like they're coming out of work, they're stressed out.
Sure.
He's like, it's the best. Like I don't have a click that attributes it, but I know I get most of my business from that. Like that's almost like a direct response billboard.
Okay.
It's almost like
Can I one up you?
Yeah.
The most successful Girl Scout troop I've ever seen was in front of a dispensary.
That's awesome.
So they set up their banner and said, pre-order your cookies in front of the place where all your cravings go.
You're gonna get the munchies now. You might as well pre-order. Mm-hmm. Super smart. Yeah. Speaking of like just basics of advertising, like I was taking a bike ride the other day, and I go down this street that's goes to this hugely popular beach called Scusset Beach in Cape Cod, and there was a kid on the side of the road with a lemonade stand, and nobody's like, it's the end of like a dead end road, and I'm like, oh my God, and then I bike ride and I realized there's hundreds of cars which have to like stop and then pay, for parking. I'm like, this kid has got like, he needs a marketing lesson. I almost stopped and said, can you pick up your freaking table and just walk like a quarter of a mile? Like get your buddies to like put it in your big red wagon with your lemonade and set it up where the people are. It's like, go where the people are. Go where the starving crowd is. Like that's the first most important thing. And Hormozi talks about this in his book all the time. He's like, what would you rather have? Like, a hot dog stand that has the best hot dogs, the organic whatever it is, like best ingredients, or would you rather have it like the only hot dog stand right outside of a huge like football game when everybody comes out? Like that is marketing right there. It's all about location. You're serving a starving crowd. So this kid, obviously, I think the next time I go down, I'm going to like tell him.
What if he though is doing it for like the pity and someone's like, oh, no one's going to see you. Here's $100 for your cup of lemonade.
I don't know. All I know is that, people that are coming off the beach are a starving crowd.
Fair.
like set it up like near the beach, and bring like a big supply. So how that relates to CAC, MER, and AOV, I think it relates to more
Or
marketing.
organic hot dogs. I can't believe you said organic. Like, there's no way that's like saying a vegan hot dog.
My wife buys organic hot dogs. I'm just telling you. It's a
How?
thing.
How?
Yeah. I have no idea.
Okay.
They say they're organic. They taste terrible. So anyway, all right. So basics of marketing here is location, service starving crowd for sure. Let's get into some of the marketing performance indicators here. So CAC is the number one. I know we have talked about this quite a bit. There's lots of different CACs. And CAC is customer acquisition cost. Tell us a little bit about CAC, Lauren E. Petrullo, either in Italian or in English, but English preferably.
Deals. So CAC is, you want to know how much it costs to acquire a new customer, right? So you're taking essentially all that you generated in sales and then dividing that against what you spent. So if you generate, say, for example, $100,000 in sales and you spent $10,000 for it, you're able to see what that cost was and then how many customers to see. Okay, of that $10,000. Sorry, I totally jumped. I was like, I'm jumping into average order value because I was like, it doesn't matter what you have the 100,000. Sorry, Kevin. Sorry, Kevin.
Just edit that out. Kevin.
I was like, whoops. Because I was like, it doesn't matter. It's just how much you spent. Okay, I'm going to start over. Wow, sorry. I feel like sweating. Okay. So CAC shows you the average cost incurred to acquire a new customer. You look at that with how much you spent and then how many customers you acquired in that set period. You divide that amongst how many customers you acquired to understand what was that cost of customer acquisition. And a lot of people will look at it from like a weekly basis or a monthly basis, or even as far as a quarterly basis, depending on if you have highs and lows inside your season, especially looking at Black Friday, which is coming up. But it's essentially saying, how much did you spend on your marketing efforts? How many customers did that generate? Divide it out so that you can make an average of what it cost per customer in that acquisition strategy.
Right. So not that we want to jump ahead, but you also said shows the average cost incurred to acquire a new customer, which there's also another metric, which is NCAC, which is slightly different, but I just want to make sure everyone sort of understands this. And then we're going to give you sort of some hints as to how to actually figure this out. So in your mind, what's the difference between the two?
The difference between the two is if you're looking at your CRM and understanding people that are new into your ecosystem, so existing customers against new customers. And if you're using, sorry, I'm going to go back to Meta because it's my favorite. If you're using sales campaigns and you're inside the audience and you've uploaded your existing customer list, it's a chance where they're kind of showing you in platform a little bit in a way, but you can see existing customers versus new customers, because obviously new customer acquisition costs allows you to scale, but understanding your general customer acquisition cost, it's almost like the cost of a sale. You just have to isolate, did someone come back and repeat a purchase? Did they exist inside your ecosystem before that? But customer acquisition, what you spent, how many customers you acquired in that time period. Let's use a month for this use case, because generally speaking, that's pretty easy. Take that number and like, cool, each new customer cost XYZ.
One of the cool things that's actually inside Meta is they actually show now in a breakdown, like how much of your traffic is new versus returning, which is really good. Like it's a great way. I don't know if you're not doing that, like we now break that down inside. Like I say, don't look at in-app metrics, but that does give you a good idea. And even though we have exclusions set up for a lot of our cold traffic campaigns, it still shows a fair amount of returning customers, because your exclusion campaigns are maybe 40, 50% effective. Like, have you seen it higher than 50%? Like what's been your experience?
It depends. I think the customer match rate has definitely made it more challenging. You'd think it would be easier because people have been on the platforms longer. People aren't changing their phone numbers as often as they had before, because you'd move to a new city. You're like, oh, I want the 773 Chicago area code. But it's actually becoming worse than I summarize, guess, speculate, with the iOS apocalypse that had happened and the continuation towards data privacy. I've just seen a lot more match rates hurt. So I agree with that component. And like, while, technically Facebook is allowing in-app visibility to the new customers and existing customers, it's only possible because you're actually incorporating new data inside the Meta platform. So you're not focused only on what's available inside of Meta. You're having a conversation where I'm contributing more for Meta to provide greater visibility so that, again, you're not losing the forest to the trees. Because if you don't supply that information, Meta's going to have to guess.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's ever going to be a way for you to really get pure data inside the platforms for new customers, especially if you're going after top of funnel, like awareness. I mean, it's super challenging, especially if you have a history, if you've got a business where you have like a list, you have people that you've been doing this for a while, like to get pure ice cold traffic, like 90 to 100% in your cold traffic campaigns. I haven't seen it. I mean, I think, 60% new, 65% is about the highest that we've seen in some of our individual clients because, we have really good exclusions and they're updated dynamically, which is super important. So if you're going between CAC and NCAC, and we're not really supposed to talk about NCAC, but I guess they are related here, but, we're sort of breaking our own rules because we're only going to do the first three. It is harder to figure that out, but you can also figure this out now, and we use Wicked reports for all of our clients that show this. Like it's NCAC versus they use all CAC or ACAC now with Wicked, which is it's a huge improvement. And kudos to Scott and his team over there because like this is an essential element. So because any stupid agency can take a retargeting list and make their numbers look good.
Oh my gosh, I hate that. Sorry, we audit so many accounts, and I'm like, these are inflated. These numbers make no sense. And then so many of the conversation is like, I know. They keep saying like, this is what I'm returning on ad spend. I was like, but look at this list. It's all of your audiences are just your existing customers. So of course it's easy. And then if they're like blending cold and warm audiences inside the same campaign and there's advantage budget optimization, I was like, oh, sorry. Back to regularly scheduled programming.
No. It totally relates back to this. So your rant about like shitty agencies, I think is okay. And we know what's up, and clients now are smarter. They've figured this sort of stuff out. That's why these marketing performance indicators are so important. You can actually show it. You can show NCAC versus, all CAC or CAC. I look at CAC as cost to acquire a customer. Some of those are returning. Some of those are brand spanking new. NCAC is my favorite, probably out of all these metrics, is the one that I like the most because it shows real growth. And it filters through the impurity of your target lists. And, there's the same thing happens in Google. It's like, oh, do you want new customers? Well, Performance Max was touted as a new customer vehicle. All it does is it just regurgitates. It finds the people that have already interacted with your brand and then just sells them. And then it makes itself look good, which, we've had plenty of episodes here with John talking about that inside Google. That's why Google is like the in-app methods are a total friggin' scam. The point is you need a third-party software to be able to sort this stuff out so that these metrics then make sense. Correct?
For sure. I mean, because if you're not using a third-party software and you're using like Google Sheets and you're having conversations with the CFO, like it's going to add a huge burden on the operations. And in these type of scenarios, third-party tools help shed the light. And going back to like the NCAC, which we'll go further into, as you said, it's the only way to know if you are not buying new customers, you're not growing. And another one that we want to talk about today, like with average order value, you are able to predict and build a formula or a simulation, if you will, to know what is your runway. So where can you invest? Where can you test? Which new markets can you enter to? And so knowing the customer acquisition costs, later when we talk about knowing the new customer acquisition cost, knowing some of these formulas allow you to not just be a marketer, but to be a business professional. And you're joining the conversation at this new level that at the end of the day, the client wins, you win, you're intersecting media buying, marketing strategy, and business performance for a 1 + 1 = $100 at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad you brought up AOV because AOV is one of the things that when a client comes to us and they're like, well, I need my new customer acquisition cost, or I need my CPA. They might probably say CPA, which really is cost, per acquisition. With most agencies, that's a blended like 50-50 warm. They were going to buy from you anyway. Or it's a view through conversion, which you're getting through your email, your SMS. So it's sort of a blended number. But that's why I like the NCAC and CAC. I need an NCAC of X dollars. Then it becomes an outgrowth of like, how can we, all right, well, if you need $50, but your average order value is like $60, like that's doesn't make a whole, like those economics don't make a whole lot of sense
Nope.
unless you have like a big pile of cash, and
Or a high lifetime value, and you know
and
that.
you have a high LTV, which is
Mm-hmm.
another thing, which I guess we're skipping around on the spreadsheet here a bit, but I mean they all interrelate. It's like it's all the platforms work together, all these metrics work together. So you really do have to know your numbers. But I find most of the clients that we work with, they want to at least break even or be profitable on the first transaction. And we acquire that customer, and then they make their money on the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth.
Yeah.
And that's a good strategy. Like, but the first month, it depends on what your product is. Obviously, let's just use supplements for example.
Sure.
We have a client that we're getting a ton of new clients, like off the charts at great NCAC. Problem is that they weren't buying again.
Oh no, retention marketing, lifestyle marketing has to come into play.
So it became less of an NCAC issue. Like we solved the NCAC. And I talked to this guy like 2 weeks ago. I was like, we solved your NCAC issue. The problem is like you guys are not selling them again. Like either that or they don't like the product.
Yeah.
So you might have a product issue there. So what we did is we cut back our spend. And they're like, well, why'd you cut back the spend? I'm like, well, it's because the traffic isn't the problem. There's something internally, and then we need to figure out what that thing is.
Sure.
And it could be a bunch of different things.
We had another client in the apparel space and faced a similar issue. We grew them significantly. We were doing $1,000 a month to $100,000 a month in sales in 6 months. Explosive growth. This was amazing. But then they hit operational challenges. We had great new customer acquisition costs, or CAC just in general was
Yep.
great, and people would rebuy. However, when the operations changed, they ended up finding a new supplier, and that new supplier ended up damaging product, and the damaged products got into the new customer's hands, and their brand reputation tanked. So we too had to shut all ads down to get this phase of it's not worth acquiring new customers that are going to hate you forever. Let's make sure we have the formula. We've solved the messaging, how we get in front of the right audience. All that's already been solved, but you have to be mindful of all these other components. So like where if you're looking at these numbers in isolation, it's telling one version of a story, and where these all combine is how, again, you get to position yourself as a marketing leader for that brand.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And a business partner for the brand, which oftentimes is doing the opposite of what you're sort of paid to do. If you're a media buyer, you're paid to buy media, right? So when we looked at this customer, our media buyers were like, yeah, let's just keep spending money. We're like, no, wait a second. So chief strategist gets involved. We are spending money for them to go out of business, because what's happening is that if you spend more money on this, and this is what their previous agency did, is that they just spent more and more and more, and all they're really doing is just recycling old customers. So they're paying for their CAC over and over and over and over and over again, which is like the cardinal sin of media buying, I think. Like they knew what they were doing, and they're like, well, we haven't grown at all, but our agency says we've got like 600% ROAS. I'm like, of course you do. It's because they're all like repeat buyers, or people who have visited your site or on your email list. So let's talk about once we did our exclusions, we really did a good job of cleaning up their lists. And then all of a sudden we're going out and getting brand new customers. We used, Facebook on that, like in app to sort of show a cold versus warm audiences, but also we used a third party attribution tool that showed like, yeah, we're getting a lot of NCAC. Great. Things are going great. But then something wrong with the product. Like they weren't buying
Yeah.
again. So they needed more, and now it's become an internal issue. Like it's a business question that they need to
Yeah.
solve, and it's not a traffic problem. It's a product question. It's an offer question. It's a retention question. It says nothing to do with
Operations.
operations. Like,
Yeah.
so we're just delving into that right now to figure out what the root of the problem is. But we basically said we're shutting off all traffic.
It's fun when you like break operations. Like when we had like our first like 6 or 7 brands that we sold out of stock, amazing. When we
Yeah.
broke call centers, amazing. We're like, oh, we're so proud. And then it just becomes, we've done it enough that it becomes a headache. But it doesn't have to be only to e-commerce products. Like it's so true with the service providing side too. If you're generating leads and they're not following up with the leads,
Oh,
then
God, yeah.
what's the point?
Right. Yeah. That's all related to this. It's like, wow, look at our NCAC, look at our NCAC. But then the client is like, well, we're not growing. Well, what's the issue?
Hmm.
Is the new customer, is it a marketing qualified lead, not a sales qualified lead? There's that question in a
Right.
service-based
Good
business.
question.
Of course. Like you got to look at that. Nothing having to do with traffic, by the way. And by the way, that's a whole separate thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
like, are the leads that we're getting quality enough? Are they qualified? Obviously, you can do targeting, and they always sort of say, well, we're not getting enough qualified leads, so it must be your fault. It must be the traffic. It must be the targeting. It's your fault, Mr. Agency. I get that. I understand. But it's
Could
usually,
be.
it's could be,
Could
but
be.
but usually if we get access to the CRM, we see whether or not their salespeople are following up.
Oh, better if you get access to their phone calls and if you can
Oh, God,
listen to
yeah.
the phone calls and then you're like, hey, this was not a positive interaction. Or this individual said, hey, I've been, so we have a client and someone called back and said, hey, you guys said you were going to call me back. It's been 6 minutes, so I'm recalling you. Can I schedule an appointment? And I was like, who took this call? So if you have that kind of stuff, again, the whole point though is for the brand to win. The end of the
Yes.
day is like, which goes into like the second, arguably one of the more important numbers is the marketing efficiency ratio. Like you need to make sure that your efforts and what you're spending are generating the marketing outcomes you're looking for.
Right. Right. And this is an important one. And MER became kind of a buzzword post iOS 14. Right? Like everyone was like, "Oh, let's switch over to MER because we no longer have visibility in app for Meta." I guess it was Meta at that point. The point is like now this is the guiding light for us. So, all right, speaking with or without your hands, or whether in Italian or non-Italian, media efficiency ratio. Let's end with this one just because it
Okay.
is so important. And what's your interpretation of it?
So for us, the media efficiency ratio is how much did you spend on all of your marketing against how much total revenue you generated. So to understand the media's attribution to your company sales and success.
Yep.
The way that we do it is we count media being all the media buying, like the ad placements, Google ads, Meta ads. If you are doing bench ads, all of that, like the media that you're paying these different advertising companies to buy against your total gross. You count yourself. You count the media operations, which I put operations in a different line. But the way I do it is how much did you spend buying media against how much you sold?
Yeah. So I do look at this differently just because this is the way that we do it inside Tier 11. I look at all of our media spend plus all of our salaries. And then that's how I do it. So for our email people, our content writers, our media buyers, VPs of marketing, everything, that's all factored in because like that's the media. Like when I look at media, and that's one portion. So my MER would be pretty outstanding because we don't spend a ton on paid ads. But when I look at the entire department, like what we spend there, our MER drastically changes. And that gives me as a business owner more visibility into the efficiency of the marketing department as a whole. So you as a business, like when we work with clients, we ask them, we say, should we throw in our fee as part of MER? And in most cases, they say yes. Some cases they don't because they want to just make it just pure advertising, just like you. So there's not one way of looking at this. I just happen to think like from a business perspective, like if I know my MER is in and around like a 3, like that's pretty darn good where we're at. That's excellent. And I'm also looking at that. There's a couple of different ways to look at this is that it's total revenue divided by total marketing expenses. But I also, there's another factor you can throw in here is total new revenue plus lifetime value. That's another multiple that we look at. So we look at, so like, not to make this overly complex, but I think as a business owner, I want to know how much am I paying to acquire a customer, but what is that, from a MER perspective, like from month to month, but then also what does that mean? Like, what's my lifetime value? I know exactly what our lifetime value is. So there's MER in a like slice, and then there's MER like over time. And I usually will use like a 12 months because people on average, clients stay with us between 12 and 18 months. So it's like, I know pretty much like in a year. So there's a lot of ways to slice it, but I look at MER as just like another metric that a business owner really wants to know. And I'd rather have all the costs included, not just the media spend. And that's just me personally.
Arguably for forecasting and budget planning, 100% it makes sense. I just isolate operations from that because if someone were to become more efficient, you can't change what you're paying to Zuckerberg, but potentially you hire a lower cost agency, or potentially we are a lower cost agency for you. So then we can increase your overall efficiency. I don't put in the operations because that can be a different variable cost. Like, for example, like literally right after this, we're shooting a commercial for a client, and that variance should be factored into like the media because that's like additional cost to it. But the operational side, like we're paying for it. The client's not being billed for it in that capacity. So anyways, at the end of the day, I agree with how you're doing it. It's going to make it sound like I'm lazy because there's ways that you can do it. And we've built in custom formulas, especially within Meta, where we've taken in cost of goods, or because we bill on a percentage of ad spend. There's ways that you can build custom formulas inside the platform to show what that looks like for a truer number. It's just at the end of the day, I am not a CFO. Yeah. And if I get too lost in those numbers, I'm going to lose focus of these bigger ones that drive a more strategic conversation. So yeah, I'm imperfect.
Yeah. Well, you're not. Yeah. I've got news for you. You're not perfect. I mean, I think you're perfect, but
Ho pensato che io sono perfetta.
See, okay. There you go. There's a little bit more Spanish. Spanish. Claro
que sí. Hablamos español ahora? Okay.
I'm definitely going to put the link to the Spanish episode for me and Kasim. The funny thing is they used the same guy's voice for both of our voices.
Oh.
Which really was messy. So anyway, I'll have to hunt that one down. 11 Labs. So,
did I ever tell you that we made Spanish YouTube videos from English videos that I filmed? And then we had videos in Spanish we filmed with talent in Latin America transformed into English. So we had tested both ways.
Oh, cool. Well, was it for your own marketing or was it for?
It was for one of our internal clients. And I can tell you that the success of the Spanish YouTube channel was 10 times better than the English one.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Are they a Spanish, like, are they based in another country outside the US that's Spanish speaking?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That would make sense. Like those other that could be a whole other episode, like how to market yourself in different languages.
Oh, I can go all day on that. What Brian Tracy has done by making his courses accessible in multi-languages.
It's such an untapped way to scale. It's crazy because like the media costs in some of those other countries are just insanely low. So I know you've got to go. We're going to keep going through the marketing performance indicators. Make sure that you do grab your copy of this over at perpetualtraffic.com/MPI. We're going to be improving these. This is our first version of it. Which is super solid, but we want to add video content to it as well as a lot of other resources. So definitely check that out over at perpetualtraffic.com/MPI. So on behalf of my awesome co-host, notice I'm doing one call to action here.
Oh, bravo.
Petrullo. How about that? On behalf of my awesome co-host, Lauren E. Petrullo.
Ciao.
Until next show, see ya.